distinct pleasure of introducing an icon in the city of Austin. Tony Budet is the president and CEO of University Federal Credit Union. It's a $2.5 billion nonprofit financial institution that serves over 220,000 members. Tony's a seasoned executive, strategist, innovator. He's held several roles at the credit union, including the chief financial officer. And with 33 years experience at University Federal Credit Union, he's guided the organization along through a variety of changing regulatory and economic and competitive conditions. In addition to a very successful corporate career, Tony has taken apart time to serve ministries and the community like probably none other. I mean, I can, if you'll read the bio in the handout, you'll be amazed at all that he's done while running such a great organization, all that he's done for our community. And I'll list a few here. One, he was the 2016 chairman of the Austin Chamber of Commerce. He was in 2014 designated the Credit Union Executive Society's Outstanding Chief Executive. And he brings the community organizations that he serves, the ABA, the Bridge Builders Alliance, the C12, Mission Possible, I'm sorry. But he serves on the Austin Crime Commission and Development Councils for the University of Texas Assistant Chancellor, Concordia University, and Dell Seton Medical Center, and several others. He's a very busy man, and we're so blessed to be able to have him speak. Tony and his wife Nancy are blessed with 2 active daughters, adult daughters, 2 son-in-laws, 3 grandchildren, and they're active members of Austin Ridge Bible Church. And I'll tell you that Tony's favorite scripture is from John 17:4. It says, "I glorified you on earth, having accomplished the work that you have given me to do." And that's John 17:4. Would you please join me in giving a rousing welcome to Tony Budet.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Yeah, great. It's good to be here. Thank you, Joe.
You bet.
I think this may be working, and I'll try to use this. I am delighted to be here tonight. I had heard quite a bit about this organization, about Frank Foster, but I've never had the pleasure to actually connect like this prior. And as I began talking to people in the community and exploring a little bit of your website and getting into the nitty-gritty of what you do, I'm so grateful for what you do for not only people who are present here tonight, but for this community. This is a topic about which I am personally very passionate. Serving with the Chamber in the past year, much of the Chamber's work focuses on a variety of challenges that our community faces, as all communities do, and one of those is trying to match up the many, many jobs that this community creates. And quite frankly, you may be challenged in finding a job, but this city is one of the biggest job juggernauts in the country. This past year, I think we averaged about 45,000 jobs that were open any given month. We tended to have about 30 to 35,000 unemployed in any given month. And you would think that'd be a good match, that you could bring these jobs and people together and solve that big problem. But unfortunately, about 80% of the people unemployed in Austin don't have the education, the certification necessary, the experience sometimes to qualify for the jobs that we create. And so unfortunately, we import quite a bit of our talent into Austin, and the Chamber sees that as a problem. And a lot of effort has gone into workforce development and working with ACC and organizations such as Job Seekers to try to correct that and make sure that everybody in Austin can enjoy the quality of life and the vitality of the economy here that Austin is celebrated for. So I am personally passionate about that, and I'm just grateful for the opportunity to be here this evening and talk to you about this topic. Recently, a good friend of mine called me up and he referred his nephew to me for a little bit of professional counseling. And I had never spoken to this man before, but he called me up and told me that he was a pastor and he was transitioning out of ministry and wanted to get back into business. I think he had done something in the business world prior. And his challenge was translating the experiences professionally that he had as a pastor into something that a business interviewer, in a job interview, could actually see value in. And so that's what our conversation consisted of. And after listening to his qualifications, his experience, his passion about what he was exploring and doing, I zeroed in on this issue of competence, because he had been talking about a lot of things. As I boiled them all down and tried to make sense of it, I said, for the last 15 minutes you've been telling me how you're competent for this role. And I told him, competence is important. Obviously, if you go into a job interview, you've got to convince someone doing the interviewing that you're competent and you're qualified for the job at hand. But I think he was overemphasizing competence, and he wasn't focusing on some other things that I think are terribly important. Because competence will get you in the door, but once you're inside an organization and you've got a job that you've been pursuing, competence is it's just a given. I begin every Monday morning with a big meeting. We've got about 25 senior people sitting around a big table, and we start every week together from 8 to 9, reviewing the week ahead, making sure that all of us are together on what's about to happen in the life of that company. And as I look around the table, everybody around that table is competent, or they wouldn't be in the roles that they're in. And most of them have long tenures with our organization, great track records that they can reflect on. So competence is important. But there's some other things that I think are just as important, if not more important. In fact, when I reflected on this conversation tonight, I thought, I don't think I have ever fired anybody for incompetence. That just never has happened to me. Now maybe that happens in other circumstances. I've yet to experience that. However, I have terminated some people for some other issues like integrity, character, strong ethics. And so I encouraged him, and I encourage you, as you're reviewing your past history of employment, as you're going through interviews, zero in on that and present some information about yourself that will assure a potential employer that you've got that covered. Certainly in my line of work, where we're dealing with people's finances, being a trustworthy organization in the marketplace begins with having employees that can be trusted, that can help build that brand and secure that brand as we go forward. Because if we're not trusted as a financial institution, close the door. We're going out of business and everybody's got to go look for work everywhere else. But focus there and see, just make sure that in the dialogue you're having with potential employers that you're able to offer some stories there, some perspective that will lead them to conclude you're someone that is trustworthy and someone of strong integrity. Another one, I've terminated people before for lack of good relational skills, a team orientation, a corporate perspective. Many times people will allow walls to come up around themselves, and they operate in silos. And at one time, I was the CFO of our company, and I saw some of that around me, and I discovered that it was me who had put the walls up. Because when I got promoted to CEO, and I began looking around the company, I didn't see any walls from the CEO's perspective. I just saw one organization. But sometimes we get tied up, and we just see our own little world that we're operating in, and I can assure you that leaders of organizations are looking for people that have a broad corporate perspective that they can demonstrate. In fact, my original boss, the CEO of UFCU, when I first joined as Chief Financial Officer, came in my office back in 1995, and he closed the door, and he quietly came and sat down in front of me, and I thought, uh-oh, we're about to have some kind of conversation here that may not go well. And he said, Tony, my wife and I had a discussion this past weekend, and we decided that I would retire in 5 more years. So we still have 5 more years to work together. And I wanted to let you know that because you and I have discussed your interest in succeeding me in this role. And that's not a decision that I'm going to make. We have a board of directors, and they're going to make that call. But there are some things that you need to seriously consider and do in the next 5 years to be considered for that job. And I'm a relatively smart guy. I pulled out a pad, got my pen, and I said, fire away. What are those things? And he gave me a long list, but I'm just going to tell you about number 1. Because number 1, he said, just now when I came in your office, it wasn't very welcoming. The way you've configured your office, you've got your back to the door and you're engrossed in some massive Excel spreadsheet on your PC, and you're convinced that if everything fits beautifully across the bottom of that spreadsheet, that all is well with the world, right? And I said, I'm your CFO, that's what I do. And he said, with all due respect to you and to accounting and to finance, all of which are important to us, this actually is not a numbers business at all. You think it is, but this is actually a relationship business. It's about people. And quite frankly, Tony, you stink at people. You're just bad at it. I literally wrote that down. And he said, that's the downside. You stink at people. The upside is, I just told you, we've got 5 more years together. And if you'll let me, I will hold your hand and I will show you what relationships do for business. And so today, if you were to walk into our office, you would see a big sign on the wall that says relationships are all there is, because relationships drive business. We all do business with organizations that certainly share our values. They have a product or an offering that is of value to us. But if we have great relationships with those people, those relationships tend to live on. I quite frankly was very, very bad at that. And so I worked hard. Thank God the board selected me. I'm grateful that they did, but that journey hasn't ended. I continue working on that and trying to get better and better. It's something that for him, quite frankly, was a very easy thing to do. But if you're like me, if you're challenged in that area, I encourage you to get some help. It is available, and you can grow in that as I have, but in business today, that is a big deal. You know, we need great people, great spreadsheet people, but they also need to have great personalities and appreciate teamwork and relationships. Even our IT people, we heavily interview for that, making sure that folks coming in can connect with the others of the organization. It's just terribly important to us. Another thing that sometimes people have had trouble with in our organization are issues of emotional intelligence. And a lot has been written about that in recent years, a lot of good books out there, issues of self-awareness and self-control, social aptitude, personal influence, and perhaps most importantly, having a purpose in your life. Most of the great leaders that I work with have something that is driving them, that is bigger than what you see in the office, something that gets them out of bed every morning, that energizes them and brings them to work ready to go. And whether they work for me or work for somebody else, that drives them. And it's very, very obvious to people who follow that is there. And a lot of that has to do with knowing who you are. Years ago, a buddy of mine recommended an executive coach that I hired. I've since used several, but this was a very heavy-duty six-month engagement where this coach asked me to identify 6 people very close to me that they were going to do a heavy-duty evaluation on me, and they did. He sent them an email note from Phoenix where he was based, and they completed these evaluations and got that back to him. Then he came to Austin, and he brought his wife and my wife, and the 2 of them, the 4 of us went out to dinner one night, and he got to know me better. And then he went in the office the next day, and he met face-to-face with each of the 6 people who had evaluated me and got them to further elaborate about what they had written about me. And then he goes home to Phoenix. And about a week later, I get a phone call and he says, okay, I've got a package for you. FedEx just picked this up. You'll have it in Austin tomorrow. And when you get this in your office, do not open it. Throw this in your bag. And this weekend, you open that up, take a look at what's in there. And then next Wednesday, we were scheduled to begin weekly 90-minute phone calls over the course of 6 months to explore what was in that package. And so I remember it was a November Saturday evening. I opened this thing up, and I began reading. And these 6 people are people that I have worked with a long time. I think the shortest tenure was about 10 years. And the first one was this woman who has done marketing and business development and worked for me for a long time. And I began going through this evaluation, and it's reading pretty good until I get about halfway down the first page. And all of a sudden, things get interesting. It says, you know, Tony sometimes can be extremely arrogant. And by the way, these are really good examples of what his arrogance looks like when she lists them. And Tony sometimes can also be very judgmental. And by the way, here are good examples of what his judgment looks like, and they're all detailed for me. And this just went on and on and on, and I get down to the bottom, and I flip the page, and I think, gee, I thought she knew me better than that. Well, number 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, they all more or less read the same way. And so I tell my wife, I'm going for a long walk, I'll be back. I just went for a walk and try to deal with that as best I could. Well, the next Wednesday comes around, and I call up Mark in Phoenix, and he says, hey, did you read everything in the package? And I said, yeah, I did. And he said, well, how did it go? How do you feel? And I said, well, quite frankly, I feel like dirt. And he said, good. That's a good place to begin. And for the next 6 months, we explored all of those issues. You see, because all of us have them. We all have issues like that. And it was like a very intensive MBA program over the course of 6 months where we read about a dozen books together and explored all these. And I could talk all night, and I won't, about the case studies he's put me through and just the weird exercises that we went through over that period that helped me deal with my weaknesses head on. Because I can't change my DNA, but I can become more aware of what issues I have. And if my tendency is to respond a certain way in certain circumstances, I can now stop and go this way instead and hopefully end up in a more productive place. And I'll always be indebted to that man for dealing with those issues with me. And so if you ever find somebody who will really tell it straight to you, loves you enough to tell you the truth about yourself, listen up. Don't let walls come up and pull away from that. That is someone who truly loves you and is really giving you an opportunity to grow. And I love being around people who do that. And by the way, I put my entire executive team through that same program, so I had a chance to say some things about them. The last issue I'll bring up today in this short time is what I call it congruence between yourself and the values of the organization that you may be working with. I've been with our organization for 33 years, and I did not set out to do that, believe me. I thought I would get there as a 30-year-old, learn whatever I could about finance in that particular sector and then move on and do something else in life. And I met some people there that were just incredible. This former CEO, he loved me. That's exactly what he did. Even today at 80 years old, this is like a second father to me. We still regularly meet. I buy him a steak for lunch. In return, he's obligated to answer any question I ask him. Then he asked me questions like, Tony, are you loving your wife and your family well? Are you going to see a doctor? And more importantly, are you doing what he is telling you to do? You're not pretty good at taking care of money, so have you got somebody taking care of your money for you? So after every lunch, I get back in my car and I feel like I've been beaten up on, I think, why do I take this guy to lunch? But he loves me. This guy, early on, when I began working for him, I just gotten married, and my wife and I had 2 little girls. And he took me aside one day and he said, if you will let me probe into your personal life a little bit, I think I can help you be a better father and daddy to those little girls. And we'd already hit it off, and I said, sure, why not? He said, okay, I want you to take a month. And the next month, I want you to think about the 5 most important things to you in your life. And I'm not asking you for the UFCU answer. I'm asking you for the Tony answer. These need to be answers that reflect what your values are in life. And I took a month. And I came back to him, and he gave me a half day in his office, door closed, and we sat on the couch in there. And he said, okay, what are they? I said, okay, I thought about this. Personal question, personal answer. I'm a Christian guy, I'm a Jesus guy. He's number 1. And then my wife is number 2. Extended family, my daughter's extended family are number 3. I had some things going on in the community at that time. I put them number 4. And number 5 is the job. And he said, okay, let's talk our way through this. And so we spent a half day going through there, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And he was really curious why I put the job number 5, because I like to eat, I like to pay my bills, I like vacations, I like taking care of my family, as anybody does. But when I thought about it, I thought, jobs are important. In fact, I think jobs are God-given. They not only provide for the livelihood of our families, but they provide for dignity and self-respect. Jobs are important. But I told him, you have the ability to take my job from me if I don't perform well, or say we don't manage our company well, we have financial problems and we need layoffs, you might lay me off. And if you fired me or if you laid me off, it would be a bad day. I would go home and together with Nancy, I'd commiserate, maybe I'd take a few days off, and then I'd get out there and I'd begin looking for another job. But in the process, you will not have taken my identity from me because number 1, 2, 3, and 4 remain intact. And I told him that's the way that I want to run my life. And over the last 30 years, I've had ups and downs, and sometimes I do that better than others, but it really has laid a course for me that's been greatly helpful in understanding what those priorities are. And if I was in a board meeting, quite frankly, and my phone went off, and I looked at my wife needed me for some emergency, I would get up and leave. And I'm confident my executive team could finish out what's going on in there, and we would be fine. And I think it's good for all of us to know what those priorities are, set those standards before we find ourselves in situations where you're questioning on the fly what you need to do. That's not the time to be figuring all that out. But I love working with people who have figured that out. And we have 700 employees, and I don't need 700 employees that share my values. I need 700 employees who know what theirs are and also know what the values of this company that I lead are, and have done some thinking about whether who they are and who we are mesh. Is there alignment there? Is there congruence? Because if there is, I think we can do great work together. Not only that, you know, Joe, you mentioned not having to go to work. I forget which one of you did that. If you get the right job, you don't go to work because you just thoroughly enjoy what you do. If your values and the values of your company are beautifully aligned, that's the way it is. That's the way it is for me. I have fun with what I do. But it's because who I am and what this company is are so enmeshed, they're so ingrained in one another that it just works out that way. And so I encourage you to think about that. You know, when you're applying for work somewhere, I hope you'll do enough research to really figure out what is the culture of that place like. What are their values? And then more importantly, go through the exercise that this former boss of mine convinced me to do. You know, figure what your values are. How in the world would you know if you're in the right place if you don't know who you are and what's important to you? Spend some time there, please. And one more thing about that, you know, I'm an avid reader, and I have read some of Jack Welch's stuff, former GE CEO and chairman. He talks about how there are 4 kinds of new employees to an organization. And I go through this talk anytime somebody joins USCU. Every new employee will come through my office in small groups of maybe 5 to 10, and we'll spend all of that, about 90 minutes, talking about the values of our organization. I tell them the story about my values. I tell them they don't need to have mine, but they need to have theirs and know what they are. And then I tell them about this story. And Jack Welch says that there are type 1 employees who join companies and they buy into the values of the company that they've joined. And then secondarily, they get the job done. And he makes the case that every company that he knows of wants as many type 1s as they could possibly get. And I believe that. I do. And there's type 2s. They come on board. They also buy into the values of that company, but they might struggle to get the job right. And he said, because business today is so commoditized, meaning it's so hard to stand out in the marketplace, even the most innovative companies on the planet have trouble staying out in front. But it's so easy these days to do research and figure out what gaps are between what you're doing and what they're doing if you're trying to emulate them and push ahead. And it's whether your staff is engaged that many times will determine whether your company succeeds. So we put in a lot of effort into staff engagement and trying to create a climate that attracts employees to it, and then more importantly, retains them and helps them grow professionally and achieve whatever their professional aspirations are. Because if we're doing that, then they're more than likely going to engage and help us succeed as a business. So type 2s come in, they buy into the values, again, critically important, but they might struggle to get the job right, and Welch says, give them a second chance. Maybe even give them a third chance. And I agree with that approach. Then there's type 3s, they come in, they don't buy into the values, they don't perform, and he says you need to show them the door. And I agree with that. Type 4s are the most interesting. They come on board, they don't buy into the values, but technically they do the job. They go through the motion. You know, we talk about sales, you know, and there's some banks that have done sales inappropriately that have been on the headlines lately. Well, we sell, everybody sells, but our standard is, imagine your mother across the counter from you. Assuming you love your mom, you're not going to sell to your mom things your mom doesn't want so that you can pocket commission, because if you do, you don't love your mom. And so whether it's your mom on the other side of the desk or on the other end of the telephone, or digitally, if she's trying to get into our systems and how easy we make them to do business with us, that's the standard. It's the mom standard in how we sell. Well, imagine having someone who is selling quite a bit. You look at their statistics, we rank everybody, they're at the top of the heap, great sales numbers, but when you begin digging, you realize that they're selling a lot of things to people who don't need those things so that they can pocket their commission. They don't love their mom, essentially, and what Welch is saying, you've got to get people like that out of the way, because they're like a cancer. In a company like ours, we have a lot of type 1s. They don't call themselves that, but they know they're good. And they know that if I mistreat them, they can leave my company like this, and they've got a fairly good chance in an economy like Austin's of getting a job fairly soon, and they will. And I can't afford for my type 1s to leave. But if they're parked next to a type 4 and I don't do something about that type 4, more than likely I'm going to lose the type 1 and the type 4 will stay there camped out forever. And so we have a lot of discussions about that with our leadership team. And sometimes you talk about type 4s and their heads kind of lean back and you can just tell they're kind of scrolling through their teams, in their head, like, do I have any type 4s? But it's really important for those type 4s to leave, not only for benefit of the company, but for their benefit. They're obviously not happy there, and so I can make them happy by having a very real conversation and saying, you know what, you don't need to be here. This is a free country, you don't need to be here, and I can help you leave, and you can find a place where you and they better mesh together, where you can be happy or be entrepreneurial. It's that kind of city. Create your own company, and you can get out there and do great things. But I'm telling you these things because it's easy when you're looking for a job to focus so intensely on competence that you might be overlooking some other things that, quite frankly, to me, are more important. We went through a job interview this morning. We're looking for an executive and had the entire executive team in a room with a woman who came in to apply for this job. And I just waited patiently for all of my colleagues to ask all of the competency-related questions they were going to ask, because I knew what they were going to do. And they did. And so they were trying to figure out, is this woman competent? I think she is. But quite frankly, I think we're going to have a lot of competent people who are going to come in the door and apply for this job. And after they finished asking all their questions, I began asking questions about integrity and ethics. Give me some examples. How does your integrity, how does it look when you're operating in an executive level capacity? What does that look like? How can you assure me that you can bring that in and be a part of what's going on here? I need people who are relational. Tell me how you build teams, because nobody in this company, even me, makes a decision anymore. Things are too complex, the scale's too big for any one person to know it all. So you've got to have people that come in and work with you to make those things happen. And if you can't work with other people, if you're not team-oriented, no matter the role, you're not going to fit with us. It's just not going to work. So my questioning is in these areas that I've discussed with you this evening, and I just encourage you to spend some time there. And it may be, these might be areas where as you're applying for jobs, you can really distinguish yourself between you and other candidates that are coming in and maybe overly relying on competence to get them in that door. And then finally, when you get the good news and someone's offering you a job, before you take it, just as one final check to make sure that you're saying yes to the right company, three things I would encourage you to ask yourself before going forward. If I get this job, what will I most look forward to on the way to work every day? And hopefully the answer is something other than a paycheck. Paycheck's important. But there ought to be something else that's driving you to accept that job. And on this job, if I take it, what am I going to learn? What am I going to learn in this environment, with this job, with these people that I'm working with? And hopefully there's a good answer to that question there. The last thing is, why there? Why would you take that job and not another? And I think if you have good questions to those answers, more than likely, you're gonna align well with an opportunity and get off to a great start. And I hope that's the case, and that whatever your professional aspirations will come true for you there. I'm gonna stop there. I'm delighted to be a part of this evening. Craig, thank you so much for having me. I don't have all these answers. I just know that in terms of our professional walk, it is a process. I'm 62 years old. I'm already talking with my board about retirement and what comes next for me. But I continue to learn, working with them and working with our team internally, and try to get better and better as a leader, because that's where the action is. And dealing with issues like this and inspiring people to perform, creating environments where folks can engage and grow professionally, it's never ending. We're always learning things and trying to get better, but that's how business competes today. All the products, all the services we offer, that's all important, but in the end, it's about human beings. My former boss was right on the money. It's about relationships, and we never quite have that figured out. We're always growing in that area, and so I wish you well in that endeavor and in your search for your new job, wherever that might happen to be. Thank you so much for having me this evening.